because I'm thinking of a referee and umpire. Last thing you want to do is do a vote every pitch. What do you think? Did I call it right or not? And I don't want to see you running down the hallway of give me feedback.
That's right.
But every once in a while, not a bad idea.
This is L&D Unlocked, a series for L&D and HR professionals looking to unlock the future of learning and development. Presented by BizLibrary, L&D Unlocked is an ongoing series where we speak to industry experts and thought leaders about the future of work, workplace trends, and how your organization can prepare today for the challenges of tomorrow. Learn more at bizlibrary.com.
Very excited, joined today by guest Kevin Wilde, over 30 years in leadership and talent development, both as a practitioner at organizations like GE and General Mills, currently Executive Leadership Fellow at the Carlson School of Management, University of Minnesota, and very excited, recent author of Coachability, the leadership superpower, which if you didn't know, is a finalist in this year's 2023 Get Abstract People's Choice L&D Book of the Year Award. So get it, available on Amazon, and most importantly, if you're listening, go vote. It's one click. So, yeah. Kevin, without further ado, you want to do a quick introduction, and maybe if you could share a little bit about the book that you just released, Coachability.
Sure, Chris, and I appreciate the big build-up invite. I mean, just the way my mother writes it. So, okay, that's the bio. But first and foremost, I love this field of learning and development. And for your listeners, I just want to go back to, I'm 16 years old. I'm a below-average student, trust me. And I was in a business club. And so we went to a weekend workshop on team dynamics facilitation. And Chris, I had never heard this topic before. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, the notion about how teams form, how people can grow, how leaders, either make a big difference or drag teams down. And we're doing exercises and all of that. And I remember sitting back saying, I want to do what that guy does. And I wonder if they pay you for that. Here I've had a 34-year career in corporate, and it's been great, and then now teaching and writing. But ultimately, I'm still a student of the field of leadership development and still want to learn. And that's probably the biggest headline of why Kevin's doing all these different things. Fellow at the university, I teach in the executive MBA program in leadership, a few other things, but just darn curious about the topics. And the big one right now is it actually goes back, and the book is based on an opening event I had as the chief learning officer at General Mills, where I would meet with a senior team. We would do a talent review, who's ready for promotion and all of that. But I started noticing that when you looked at the list of highly promotable, there were names missing. And I would say, excuse me, whatever happened to so-and-so? Like, oh, Kevin, they've they're not here anymore. Like, oh. And I left thinking, I'm just darn curious. Why is it someone talented, hardworking, we believed in, well qualified, and at some point got over their heads? So I started doing some due diligence, started doing postmortem interviews with managers and all that. But the biggest thing was I went to their personnel file, and their last 360 survey of record had one question dramatically lower than the peer population of officers and directors. And the question was, does this leader seek and respond to feedback? Their scores of the derailment 30 points lower. It almost predicted something bad was going to happen. And that led me down the path of blind spots, derailment, how do you avoid it, and ultimately why some people keep their what I call coachability as a superpower and some lose it. And then lately at the university, the research that I've both discovered as well as I've created myself, that there's a huge upside if leaders can stay coachable. Higher levels of performance, engagement of the employees, higher sales, essentially on and on and on here. So there's something about this coachability topic that I think is powerful. And the book is the latest attempt to get the word out.
Man, I am so excited to jump in today. Kevin, I'd get my kind of list of milestones that are going to take us through. I was going to start on the giving feedback side, but why don't we start on kind of this notion of coachability as a leading predictor for success and tenure within an organization? What are some of the attributes of those that are doing it the right way that signal to others, hey, I'm a highly coachable individual. I want to be invested in, I'm engaged with. What does that look like when it's going well?
Yeah, when it's going well, you're 25 years old and just starting out. Come on, well, and again, the research, we cut Coachability. We had a database of 50,000 leaders with the 360. This is my friends at Singer
Mhm.
Folkman, a consulting firm worldwide, over 1 million data points. And we created a coachability index. And we found highly coachable leaders typically earlier in a career. You think about it, you're just starting out, people know you have things to learn. While it's a little touchy to learn how to give feedback, get feedback, you kind of want to pick it up. And then it kind of declines with level and age. And we need to get it back. The probably the most interesting thing that I've uncovered lately, and I'm still scratching my head on it, is I have a self-assessment on coachability. What are your practices? What's your
Mhm.
mindset? And we just did a revalidation of that where we had 332 leaders as judged by others, are you coachable or not? And then their own self-survey. And the IO psychologist that helped me on the work came back with, hey, Kevin, do you know 5 questions? 5 questions predicted high coachability. Like, oh, really? And they basically broke down into 2 categories. So back to the what are the attributes of someone highly
Mhm.
coachable? How do you get it back? 2 of the questions dealt with this. Feedback is critical for me to achieve my goals or to develop. So not just I get feedback because it's nice to do or HR told me
Mhm.
to do it or here's my like, no. I can't get to where I'm going without input from others, without observations, without notes, without et cetera. So for the highly coachable person, when they think about, okay, what am I curious about? What do I need to learn? And where are my blind spots that I need to reach out to others so I can get there? That
Mhm.
one is pretty obvious. That's kind of the why. The other one was a stunner. It was 3 questions, given all the, and this had 60 attributes of leadership, all the great things leaders need to do. The questions that correlated highly to coachability, in addition to why I'm doing it, is who. They were relationship items that highly coachable leaders scored much higher than average. And they were diversity items. They were diversity and inclusion items. And at first, like,
Wow.
what? What? And as I think about it, and I'm interested in your sense, highly coachable people not just value feedback and learning because they want to get somewhere, they value people and they value people different than them. And they want to hear and learn about differences. So, if you want to be highly coachable, one, what matters? Where you really would enjoy coaching and feedback from others. And then 2, who? How important are relationships? And those are the 2 latest insights I found on coachability.
Wow. So, Kevin, as you were sharing that story, it reminded me of something I personally experienced prior to the corporate world, and for a long time in parallel. I officiated baseball, a baseball
Mm,
umpire. I started literally in T-ball because I needed gas money. I think at that time it was
wow.
20 bucks with a 50-minute time limit. I always sign me up on Saturday.
Hey, yeah, yeah.
I'll go do as many as you can load me up with. But I ended up advancing into junior high, and eventually collegiate, and kind of culminated working within SEC, ACC conferences here
Mm,
in the
mm,
Southeast. And I advanced at a clip, just in terms of my age, much faster than many of my peers. I don't know that it was my intrinsic ability on the field. I was pretty good, but I think the thing more than anything else, as you were talking, that is one of those spaces where there's many opinions. They are diehard, and there's a lot of pride in how it's done.
mm.
And I would solicit anyone and everyone in the locker room before the game, after the game, like, what did you think?
Mhm.
And I think the great equalizer in that was it didn't matter if they were more senior, less senior, thought highly of, regarded as average. I think, being the person who was looking to try to get advice wherever you could find it, and kind of making that your reputation and letting that define you. Certainly, I can speak to, like, personally, it was a big win in helping kind of advance through the ranks in that particular domain, and not something that you always see quite as prevalent in the corporate space.
Mhm. Yeah, in the corporate space and others are places too, we sort of get into a doing mode. as I started doing the research and the interviews with coaches, and I interviewed 50 executive coaches, by the way, at the start on what is this coachability thing, looked at the literature, everything from emotional intelligence to feedback seeking and all that, and came up with a very simple model that I want to apply to your umpiring. Okay, so first of all, highly coachable people we found have a mindset, and it is the growth mindset of I'm not done, I can learn more. What unlocks that is a separate study that I did, which had both coachability seen by others. We had 200 leaders, but we also had their confidence score. And I'm thinking, but if you want to be a referee or an umpire, you better have a lot of confidence, right? And what was interesting was what happens to coachability as your confidence goes from low to very high. And what I found is it's curvilinear, that it starts low, low confidence, low coachability. You don't ask, right? I feel vulnerable. I feel exposed. I'm just darn tired. I just don't want to know, right? And I've been there, right? Okay, but that's not a learning place. And if you get stuck there too much saying, well, I'm going to wait till it's psychologically safe, your growth is going to be stunted. On the opposite extreme is way too much confidence, right? And that's I call it the I can't zone. Or the I don't care, rather. I don't care zone. I don't care zone, right? And the last half of my career, I spent a lot of time nudging great executives like, get back in the care zone. Come on. And that's the overconfidence that I don't need to ask. Who are they to tell me something, right? Back to the why and the who. But the sweet spot was the learning zone. And your story is one where you found a way to get in your learning zone, asking ahead of time, asking afterwards. And I just want to share just two techniques because we found is the highly coachable people get back to the why. I want to keep learning and growing. I can get better. I want to avoid blind spots, et cetera. But also then the how do you go about it? And what we found is there were 4 practices that people found a way to do these things consistently to keep them in their learning zone. And you just explained one, which is why, which is the asking, the seeking. Highly coachable leaders have a mindset of self-improvement. They do 4 practices. Find ways to seek it, respond well when it shows up, think about it enough, and if it matters, you do something about it. And the people that were consistent at those 4 practices stayed in their learning zone. So one, you had the humility to ask, that interest in asking, right? But I'm guessing also the confidence to just hear what you get, right? So you're not shutting it down, you're not dismissing it, you are just really listening, and then you decide, is this helpful to me or not? Because I'm thinking of a referee and umpire. Last thing you want to do is do a vote every pitch. What do you think? Did I call it right or not? And I don't want to see you running down the hallway of give me feedback. But every once in a while, not a bad idea. Which leads me to the second thing. So finding ways to seek it. Like, what do I want to learn? What are some ways I can ask? And you gave both examples of when you'd ask and who you'd ask. But the other one relates to a story that I'm almost embarrassed to talk about, but it's in the book, so here we go. So early in my career, I got a master's degree in leadership, right? So I really studied this thing. I was the guru of leadership, right? And then at one point in my General Electric days, I was a shop supervisor. So I was a manufacturing leader. I had 32 technicians, 2 shifts, and this is way back. And Elliot, for most of your listeners, they're not going to believe this, but my job on the first Friday was to walk around the shop floor and pass out physical paychecks. This was before direct deposit, right? So I'm passing out paychecks thinking this is really boring. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to crack a joke. So every time I would give someone a paycheck, I'd say, hey, big money, here you go. Or boy, don't spend it in one place. And did you earn it all? And I thought it was funny, right? I get back to my supervisor cubicle and there sitting in my chair was my lead supervisor, Jim. And Jim said, Kevin, sit down. So I said, all right. So I sat down. He said, I'll remember this to my dying day. Grin on his face, but very sincere. He said, Kevin, we've been talking this week. You're going to be fine as our new boss. But I got to tell you, when you pass out paychecks, shut up. And I was shocked. I was horrified. I didn't realize, talk about a blind spot. And, I apologized. I then went out later and talked to everybody. I'm sorry, I won't do this anymore. And then it got me thinking about what really mattered. And what mattered was Jim was willing to tell me that. Otherwise, I would have been doing that stupid comedy act every other week, and I'd be building a lot of resentment in my workforce. And I'd be a blind spot till it blew up. And so what Jim was my truth teller and my trusted advisor. And trust me, throughout that assignment, I'd be checking in with Jim. How am I doing? What am I missing here? If you were me, as with you and umpiring, like, yeah, you're just actively finding ways to add there. In the learning zone, I'm confident enough to hear what comes out, but curious enough that I want to know. And every once in a while I wouldn't ask, and he'd be sitting in my chair like, okay, Jim, what? So the one, bit of coaching is once you figure out, okay, where do I want to learn to get better? And then how do I live it? And I got to ask in the confidence zone. And part of it is just what questions you want to ask, but it's also the who I want to ask and who's your trusted advisor. And, and I've got this on all my blogs, and I think you can put up the website, thecoachability.com. I've got a blog on the 6 ways to find a truth teller. And one of the ways is make sure they're people different than you, because your perspective is going to be much richer, speaking of the diversity aspect, if people see the world and experience the world differently. And if you can build that into your, if you will, advisory network, you're going to be a much better leader.
Yep. I was feverishly taking mental notes and literal notes. There's so much to unpack there. If I can, let me start with this one from personal experience, and I'm curious. I'll tell on myself too. I don't have Kevin's book yet. It was supposed to arrive yesterday. It didn't make it on time, but I've read most of your blogs, and I'm curious if this comes up in your book. One of the things that I found to be a make or break in the longevity of the coaching relationship is your response when you don't agree with the feedback. And I'm curious, Kevin, in my experience, it's generally, not always, but generally I found it's best to internalize the feedback, apply what resonates or hits with you, and if it doesn't, let it go. I think I've, on the flip side, what I've seen with a decent amount of coaching sessions is the one piece of advice that may not even be in the grand scheme of things relevant or germane becomes a conflict point, and also signals I'm not a particularly coachable person. But what's your thoughts when you're receiving feedback and maybe there's a point or two that don't land like maybe like the person sharing the advice thinks it will?
Absolutely, it's a great question. And again, the book Coachability, the leadership superpower. The first half is sort of the model in the case. Second half is nothing more than all the techniques and strategies we used and learned from these highly coachable leaders in those 4 categories. How do we seek it, respond well, think about it enough, and then act on it? On the respond thing, 2 things came up that I thought were very useful. One is that notion about, look, if someone's giving you feedback, the last thing you want to do is listen. The last thing you want to do is listen. What you don't listen to, what you shouldn't listen to, is those little internal defensive voices. And there's 2 that are my favorite that I get all the time when someone's giving me feedback that it's tough, I don't like it, whatnot. Knowing that my job at the moment is to demonstrate openness and coachability. I want to get the message. I want to maintain the relationship. You can then decide what to do with it. But you got, rather than pushing, the hand to talk to the hand, not good. And the 2 little voices I experience, one is the, someone starts telling me something, little voice says, you don't understand. You don't understand. And the little voice kind of gets annoyed. And by the way, maybe they don't. But at the moment, I'm not hearing the whole message. Because let's face it, giving feedback's hard. It's messy. It's a gift that comes poorly wrapped. And, the best coachable leaders, can pause and say, let me understand this. Tell me more. What's an example? Can I just want to hear this thing, right? Like, I really need to hear more, or let me think about it. But the other voice is the who are you? Who are you to give me feedback, right? And that little voice is like, tell me when you're done talking, Chris, because I got feedback for you. And maybe you do, but it's just not helpful. I mean, that's the very defensive. And again, we probably learned it as primates, like, we just, have to defend ourselves. And I think you got to bring that down. And you guys, it's human nature. There are little voices again. I just, in that phase about I'm getting it, I just need to be a role model. I need to be open, I need to listen. I need to understand the message fully, so then I can think about it. The other thing is, an actor, professional actor, taught me this. I was going through this whole research we found on responding well to feedback. As my friend Scott Echt out in New York, he said, hey, when I was doing, off Broadway, et cetera, professional actors, when they get into the field, the first thing they learn how to do is to take a note. I said, I've never heard that. Is take a note. And some of your listeners know what this is. But essentially, at the end of a rehearsal, you stay on stage, and the director gives every actor a note, basically feedback, right? And he said, you learn how to take that note. And he said the only time over the years that he was very disappointed is when a director did not have a note for him because he had no way to expand the character, no way to try something differently, no way to understand how the lines were landing and all of that. And to me, that was a great mindset. And I like that as a trigger phrase. So when the little voices kind of say, I don't like this feedback, and in the moment I'm trying to push against it, I just have a trigger phrase. And I think I'm just taking a note. What's your trigger phrase? Just to take it again. I'm going to judge this thing later, but I just need to understand it. And one around the house I like using is, oh, here comes my tip of the day. Here comes my tip of the day. So having a little, phrase, but okay, I know I'm being defensive here, but I got to hear this. Yep. Because I cast the shadow of leadership. I'm building a relationship here. I want to be coachable. I want to learn, avoid blind spots. Let me take it in. Then the next thing, highly coachable leaders value self-improvement. They seek it systematically. They respond well when it shows up because they asked or it didn't, but then they think about it. And I think that's when you judge, hey, is this good feedback or not? And sometimes you can just, journal a little bit or, think about it on a walk or whatnot. But I also back to the truth teller, right? So go talk to Jim. Go talk to your trusted advisor. Hey, I got this feedback. I don't like it. Before I dismiss it, is there anything in here I should consider? Or have I heard this before? So those are some ideas on both how to respond as well as how to think about that feedback.
There's so much wisdom wrapped up in that segment. A couple of thoughts that were going through my mind. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten is to make sure that you're responding, not reacting. Mm-hmm. And I think what you described of, as those voices creep in, that you remind yourself, hold on, this is a note, this is a coaching moment. Like my job right now is to listen and internalize, and I'll formulate a response, because I agree with exactly what you said. It's an instinct, years of evolutionary response to fight or flight in this moment right now. And it's funny you brought up acting. We do QBRs at BizLibrary, and they tend to be big and themed. And at our big quarterly business reviews, we just did one where we were really drawing inspiration from the rock and roll industry and going on tour and performing. Yep. And we talked about this in a very, very similar context. There it was communication with clients, but the principles are the same. It's a performance, not in a disingenuous way, where we're not trying to fool anyone or get one over on them. A performance in the sense that what we're most conditioned to do, what the natural instinctive reaction isn't always the right one, and you really have to put yourself into character at times to drive outcomes that are the best for everybody. Because if you just did what Chris would naturally do on a Saturday afternoon, that may not be the right response in this coaching moment or in this client interaction. And to really be thoughtful about, hey, I'm going to put on my acting hat right now. I'm someone receiving feedback, and that's really who I need to be in this moment. All right, I need to be de-escalatory in this client conversation as we work through some sort of issue that they may be experiencing. I think you're spot on with the note parallel.
And I think back to, I love what you're saying about, go study how someone else does it and how to bring that in. But again, it's getting you in the learning zone. And I think the learning zone, as much as we talk about, here's how the actor does it, it's on mission. I'm trying to have a great performance for the audience, right? I'm trying to bring the value of my organization to the client. But the feedback is not about me, it is for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that mindset puts you in the learning zone, but then authentically, right? I think it's okay to say, this is kind of tough feedback for me to hear. I'll understand it. Let me feed back to you what I heard. Blah, 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 blah. Did I get it? Good. I'd like to think about it. Thank you. Or as with my paycheck, like, no, I don't need to think about it. I screwed up. I apologize. I won't do that again, right? So there are some, I did, I'm not going to think about it, but I think you've got permission to say, did I get this message right? Great. Yeah. Thank you, coach. I'm going to think about it and then close the loop if necessary.
Good. Hey, Kevin, up to this point, we've mostly talked about getting in the learning zone from the perspective of the person receiving feedback. Why don't we talk a little bit about creating healthy environments for learning zone? And if I can advise the audience a little bit, maybe on where we start, just a parallel between the story I shared of like, hey, pre-game and post-game, we're always going to talk about what we expect and then how we did. And in your story of the note, what's consistent in both of those is there was kind of this known, understood process for feedback. And I often think that's a missing component where feedback comes at unexpected times or it's not consistent. But I'm moving this into a discussion of how do we go create learning zones. But could you maybe speak to frequency and timing and kind of how that plays into creating environments that are going to get to good outcomes for all?
And it's a great question, Chris. And I would say that there's probably other people out there that have written many more books on how to give feedback. I'll give you my experience and a few thoughts, but there's a lot out there. As a matter of fact, I once did a Google search as part of writing the book using Google Trends, where I put in how do I give feedback versus how do I receive feedback, and the ratio was 10-1. So we all have an appetite to get it better. I mean, it's tough to do. It's tricky. We're not used to it. But again, back to my book on coachability, it'd be darn much more easy if I knew the other side was practicing receiving. And I think the notion about I'd start with how do you role model it yourself? Because you're almost given more permission to give feedback if people know that you have role modeled it yourself. As a matter of fact, if I were to do a coaching, how to coach managers to be coaches, I would start by saying, we're not going to give you the techniques. We're not going to give you the learning questions, all that. Go out and learn something yourself, right? Go learn from the rock and roll industry. Go out personal. How do I get better at present? And then let's talk about what you learned when you got feedback. So I'd start with not just role modeling, but empathy for when I receive feedback, what are the things that help me hear the message? And then knowing people might be different on that, but starting with, okay, let me just do a little inventory here. Where were times that the message was just hard to hear and I wish it was differently? I want to not do those things. What are some things I want to do? One bit of feedback I got back in my my boss career later on is I was in learning leader at General Mills, and my team was saying, Kevin, you're just piling on way too much work. We don't know the priorities. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. Let's just have regular meetings where we can talk about priorities. And I would just do a process every few months of, okay, let's kind of sit down. Here's where we're going. Here's where you're going. Priority-wise, let's take things off your plate or add things. And I would say, hey, I want to give you some feedback on how things are going, but what do you think? And then also feedback for me. And those were more of the structured. I want to have back to the seeking feedback. I want to have some ways that it's part of our relationship. We're going to check in. And after a while, the staff came in with stuff. It was a little awkward at first. So I think we both build a relationship with a mutual, role modeling, giving and getting. Yeah. And I think that's another thing I would offer about, there's the spot, but the final thing I'll say, one of the reasons that I've discovered that we lose coachability over time, I call it the empty gym. And it's a picture of my local gymnasium on January 2nd. January 1st, man, we're all in there. We're lifting the heavy weights. We're getting feedback. And the next day we wake up, I can't get out of bed. And if you're not used to feedback, both giving and getting, it's kind of hard. So finding little things, little ways to get it started, asking, how did I do on that presentation? What's one thing I could do a little better? Or, hey, I noticed something here. Would it be okay if I gave you one tip? And just starting with small, regular, both giving and getting, and I think build it from there.
Kevin, I love that you flipped that question on its head. So I'm just going to keep running with it. Let's speak to the manager who's listening to this, and right now they're going, if I could only get that person to listen, Kevin, but how do I coach them? And your first response is lead by example. If you want to be a better coach, you should probably be focusing more on your own coachability and demonstrating that will then lead to more productive sessions when you're coaching. Could you speak maybe more to the example you gave? If I'm a manager, what are some of the things you would encourage them to encourage feedback from their direct reports, which they may not be doing today, may be very uncomfortable or not have the confidence like you spoke to earlier? Maybe how do you begin that journey if that's not a muscle that you're flexing today?
Yeah. Back to what are you curious about? Back to what would you value? What's important for you? And I think I would flip it again that if I want to give someone feedback, do I really care? And again, I've had moments where I've had great employees and they've done great things and they've taught me a lot. And then I had one or two that didn't work out. And as I look back, I could have given them more feedback early. And back to the kind of the low points of my career is like, I could have been a better leader. And part of it is role modeling the feedback. But I'd say, yeah, part of it is if I care enough, I want to give it and take the risk. But it's a muscle to build. Again, in terms of getting it, a couple techniques I've seen. One I call the pocket question. which is, do you have a feedback question? Just pull out of your pocket. It's easy to ask. One thing, Chris, we're going to do, and I do it every time I do a webinar or a podcast, is when you stop recording, I'll ask you 2 questions. And it'll go like this, Chris. So get ready for this. Number 1 is, hey, that was great. I'll be doing more of these podcasts. I really want to get better. What's one thing I did well in the podcast I should do again? And what's one thing that would be even better next time? And that helps get me in the learning zone. And so having those little pocket questions, hey, I'm trying to get better at presentations. Would you mind watching me next time? And what did I do well? And, am I speaking too fast, or am I talking over people? And so getting specific on what you want to learn and sharing that, and then responding well when it shows up. Because typically, if you're starting to ask for the first time, people are like, whoa, Chris never asked before. What's going on here? Is he in trouble? And so it takes some time to say, hey, I'm just trying to get back in that learning zone a bit more. And here's something I'm darn curious about. So after action reviews, pocket questions, I think even among your staff, there's probably someone that is probably have a stronger relationship. Start there. Say, hey, I want to make sure I'm in tune with my staff and I don't have any blind spots and I want to know what's going on. I think I probably missed some things. What are you seeing going on right now that I'm doing well? I want to continue. What's one thing that would be a little better? And then, expand that, if you will, trusted advisor question to others on your team. And again, the Coachability book's got a number of other techniques that leaders do to get that muscle of feedback. But again, it goes back to those 2 themes. What's critical? Can I get it done without feedback? And if it's like, I care, I want to know. So it starts with a mindset. I want to know. You're the umpire. I want to know. I'm I'm selling in my organization. I want to know how I'm doing with clients, more so than I am now. And then who? I value this. I value differences. I really want to hear. And I think the E&I movement has helped us on that. How do I expand my network and be darn curious about things in a courageous way?
Yep.
And so I think that's the mindset.
Love it. I feel like I'm going to be that director who's like, I don't have any notes for you, Kevin. This whole conversation's been great, but I'll see if I can think of a couple. Hey, we've got one final segment for you. If we can, before we start that, I'm going to do a quick thank you to the sponsor of this episode. You know him well, BizLibrary.
At BizLibrary, we know that employee development and retention have never been more critical to your business. We help you build learning programs that create safe and inclusive work environments, elevate employee skills, and develop leaders who drive results. So now, you can take award-winning BizLibrary content and put it to work to help overcome your biggest challenges. BizLibrary, where learning happens.
Very relevant to the conversation that we're having right now. One of the best technology solutions that we bring to help bridge this gap and have better conversations between employees, their managers, their peers is found within our solutions. If you haven't looked at BizSkills yet, you need to come take a look. One of the things that it does is facilitate open dialogue around where we sit within our skill sets between managers and their employees. And then I think the best part is it puts it into action in an automated way. It automates the mapping of skill opportunities to content and curriculum that's designed, purpose-built to help people advance their careers, both within the role that they're currently performing for you. And then most importantly, like Kevin spoke to earlier, mapping out their career path so that they don't exit the organization. We want them to grow with you over time. And we bring technology solutions that help you automate and put in systems and cadences so that these things don't fall off by the wayside. So if you haven't looked at Biz lately, then you haven't looked at Biz. It is where learning happens. Please go take a look here at the end of the episode. And as Kevin has called out, don't forget to vote. There's only about a month left, Kevin. Is that right?
End of September they close the polls. But yeah, Get Abstract is doing the People's Choice, and the Coachability book is up. I'm honored to be there because it's People's Choice. I need people. And if your people are my people, a little click would be helpful. Again, get the word out on this learning coachability. And as you said, whether it's helping someone build out a career map saying, hey, I'm valued here, I want to keep growing. I've got some great tools that help me. And I've got managers and others around me that are supporting me in their learning. And having these kinds of tools are terrific.
Hey, Kevin, why don't we end on this? One of the things that we focus on here is the intersection of both skill development with talent technology. And but before we started recording, you had mentioned some rise of generative AI and new things that you were seeing. I'm curious as it relates to coachability and some of the things that you're seeing emerging in the market. What's catching your eye? What do you think is interesting to help us all do this a little bit better and have more productive conversations?
My kickoff last night, I was presenting coachability to a local coaching professional network group, and I said, I love coaches. They've helped me. You're going to help others, but I got to say that coaches typically now have three things on their mind, right? How do I get more clients? How do I do even better with my clients? And then lately, am I going to be replaced by a robot? And I said, I don't know about the third one. So candidly, Chris, I'm curious. I'm in the learning mode. I want to watch where this thing goes. I've been experimenting. I found, one or two people I follow that are very credible. So I just find that anytime you're trying to master a subject, you got to jump into it. You got to play with it using your learning style, but follow credible people. And so I'm learning from one or two. I had a session yesterday where this, if you could call it one of my mentors, she just took a half an hour and said, hey, let me show you how to use ChatGPT for this question. And I just watched what she did, like, wow, that is fascinating. So I'm more in a curious learning mode on this. But I think over time, there's always the hype that it kind of goes a little too far. Like, no, you're not going to be replaced by a robot, but a robot can help you. Now, how do you work that in the mix? And I think there is kind of a learning resource there as well as a productivity that I think is very useful. And there's a little bit of hype too. So coming to like a BizLibrary, like, okay, these are credible people. They curate stuff. They know what the heck they're talking about. I want to learn from them. So I think ultimately what I'm trying to do, and I encourage readers, like, okay, it's a good topic. And people are all over the map on this one. Find a couple credible sources, learn from them, dive into their stuff, and then play with it and over time see where it goes.
Absolutely. Can I share where I see kind of reality and then where is our future on this front? Right now today, that I think has been a huge step forward is really the automation around currency with skills to job roles. That's, if you look at whether it's World Economic Forum or some of the other kind of major publishers out there on the rate at which skills are changing, it's dramatic. And so just kind of that knowing what to coach on, which skills are critical, that's been a huge obstacle. Teams have spent just inordinate amounts of time trying to develop these taxonomies. And I think largely that is a problem that the reality we're now living in is we can really solve that very elegantly with technology. I think what I'm most excited about on the future, where we're just starting to understand how to tap into this, is demystifying a little bit on what requires coaching. I think one real gap for managers is they get exposed to maybe 10% of what an employee does in any given work week or work month, only worse in the world or more difficult in the world of remote work. And oftentimes the best coaching opportunities may go unseen to the manager, and helping that manager really know where the relevant kind of high impact coaching areas are.
Very exciting. Yeah. And I'm glad you guys are doing that research and again, helping us, because it's a very demanding role. And the more, as much as, I didn't want to take the time here to say, all right, leaders, here's more things you need to do, because we're doing so much. But again, a little bit on blind spots, a little bit on coachability feedback, but also reaching out for help. And what you've mentioned is an exciting future.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here. Please, if you haven't done it, order a copy. Coachability available on Kevin's website directly or on Amazon, and make sure to go vote. Wishing you the absolute best of luck, Kevin, in the finalists here as they wrap up at the end of the month, and hope to have you back sometime. It was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, fun. Love to follow up on it. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, thanks.
This episode has been brought to you by BizLibrary. Head to bizlibrary.com for more information.